This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and we've covered the issue of biotech workers and biotech safety. And today we're going to be talking with Becky McClain, who is a molecular biologist. She was working at Pfizer in Grotton, Connecticut, and she's just finished a book after a long struggle to get it written called Exposed, A Pfizer Scientist Battles Corruption, Lies, and Betrayal and Becomes a Biohazard Whistleblower. So welcome to our show, Becky.
Thank you, Steve. It's nice to see you again.
So, Becky, why don't you talk about being a molecular biologist? You began to work at Pfizer, and that was an important event for you in your career. They have a large number of scientists there. What was it like working at Pfizer when you first came there?
Well, when I first began my work at Pfizer, I had around 17 years of experience in the lab. So I was a very skilled molecular biologist. And coming to Pfizer was a fantastic thing. The first 5 years I worked on vaccine technologies and research and development. And it's when I started working in an embryonic stem cell laboratory, working with technologies that could change one's genome, an animal genome or a human genome, that things changed completely. And I began to see some very poor biosafety practices that were a public concern.
And this whole issue of the money that's going into biotech, you were developing drugs and learning about how to fight diseases. And the introduction of this new technology, that was part of your job. I mean, using that technology.
We were definitely on the cutting edge of technologies. I was working in an embryonic stem cell lab, and at that time, uh, as if you can remember, around 2005, there was a lot of hype about embryonic stem cell technologies because they wanted to use the human embryo also in the laboratory, and there wasn't federal funding for it, and there was a big hoopla about trying to get money to work on human embryos. I was working with mouse embryos in a embryonic stem cell laboratory, so I knew of all the technologies. The technologies are the same, and behind the use of human embryos is a lot of money, a lot of money. So that was when I started raising safety issues in the lab. This movement didn't want my story to come out because they didn't want to hear about injured workers in embryonic stem cell laboratories when they were trying to get a lot of money and telling the public that this technology was very safe.
And you were also, I understand, on the safety committee at facility. It was non-union, but they did have a safety committee.
Yes, it was initially instituted. We didn't have one prior to this, and I was happy because we had really glaring biotech safety issues, and we couldn't get them addressed. Our management wouldn't address them. So when they instituted this safety committee and they asked me to be on it, I was overjoyed, thinking that, hey, finally we're going to get some remedies from these dangerous uh, biosafety concerns of public concern, public health and safety concerns, because we're working with technologies, viruses, other type of technologies that if a person gets infected can change, uh, the metabolic constitution of your cells, and they can be dangerous.
And there were a large number of scientists working at this facility, weren't there?
6,000 scientists at the Pfizer Groton.
Yeah.
So I was overjoyed that we were getting the safety committee. In the first meeting, they handed us these sheets, and they said the role of the safety committee was to perform inspections in our umbrella laboratories, which was around 300 scientists within the department where we're doing these technologies. And I thought that was a good idea, although the inspections they were told they were going to be inspected. It was not a surprise inspection, so everything could be cleaned up. Well, it ended up that on the first meeting, our issues in the lab, which were serious issues of not having a, a safe break room. You remember, we're using technologies that if you mix it with food, it could infect you or poison you. We did not have an adequate break room. We didn't have safe office space. Biocontainment issues were being seen with infectious agents. So these were serious issues. So when we brought these up on the initial safety committee, basically after that, management found out and everything was silenced. And we never gathered together after that, only after one. And they wouldn't address they wouldn't address the safety issues. So we ended up going around inspecting laboratories that knew we were coming, checking the box that everything was safe and sound when we knew it wasn't safe and sound. So it ended up that the fear of being fired for raising safety issues became the the establishment in the department because people were afraid to lose their jobs.
And you had a leak in your laboratory. I mean, first of all, as you say, you didn't have a breakout room for lunch. You had to eat where you were working, where there were these toxins around or biological materials. So you're actually in an area that's not safe
That's true.
for having
That's
lunch. And you told them about this. You had concerns that you
me and other people. You have to realize that not having a safe break room is so egregious that this has been a decade long established biosafety rule uh, that you should have a break room. That's even in chemistry labs, any type of laboratories. And here we're working with dangerous technologies. So when we bring this up, they just would ignore us. Oh, and in the book, you'll find how the reply of management is just so surprising to all of us that we're shocked beyond belief. And then soon they're putting pressure on us, and it's all obvious that we're supposed to shut up about this.
and we're talking about the one of the largest drug companies in the world. They make
Yes.
billions of dollars. You would think, and this is what I thought when I first met you and started learning about this whole situation, that they would want to protect the scientists, the health and safety of the scientists who are making the products that are making them their profits.
Yes.
Right?
You
Like
would think so.
ABC, you would think, like,
Yes.
let's protect our workers who are producing this.
But it's obvious from my story that that is not the case. Pfizer protects themselves and their liability. That's what it's all about. And making money, of course. But uh again, I was just shocked and other people in the department was just as shocked that this was going on and it was dangerous.
And you had a serious problem in your laboratory that raised concern about your safety and the safety of other fellow workers. And you tried to raise that. Why don't you talk about that biological cabinet, the leak, and your effort to get it repaired?
Okay, the biological, because I was going to say which problem did you want me to talk about? Okay, well, this was after we raised several issues and they were ignoring it. I believe Pfizer already exploded. There was a big accident at Pfizer. And then after ignoring our safety complaints and not having a venue to get them addressed, we started falling ill with exposures. And one of the exposures was from a biosafety biocontainment cabinet. Now, these cabinets are used, you've seen them on TV, where a scientist has their hands inside a big cabinet with a glass facade or face, and you usually use infectious agents in there or biologics that you need to keep sterile or cell cultures to protect you and the environment from escaping or to keep them just sterile. So after so many years in my career, all of a sudden, uh, it took a while because this noxious odor was coming into the lab and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was immediately within 10 minutes making us sick with nausea, headaches.
This is pretty serious. You're working with dangerous materials, and these fumes are coming in, and you're getting sick from this. I mean, it sounds like an emergency
Well,
situation.
it did. We ended up having to call the fire department to figure out what was going on because it was the second time that this was coming in and we couldn't locate the source. We finally located the source and it was coming from the biocontainment hood out of the filter on top where the air is being pushed into the room. Now, the air is being pushed into the room, but there's a HEPA filter that should capture all the viruses and everything. But never in my whole career have I uh, seen or had this happen that a biocontainment hood all of a sudden is emitting a noxious odor. Now, uh, this went on for 8 months, and we were constantly complaining because we were getting sick a lot.
So you and other scientists were getting sick because this cabinet was
Was
not working properly and you're
Yes,
getting fumes and toxic material through
yes.
the
Well,
laboratory.
the frightening thing was that after we discovered it was the biocontainment cabinet, we had an expert come in from the cabinet department, from the biocontainment department, uh, uh, and he became very ill. He took the hood apart, and a HEPA filter, which collects all the viruses and which should collect all viruses and all bad things that are trying to come through the hood, was had turned from snow white to completely black. There was some sort of black thing in the and being captured. And then it was
Subway.
being it was so much it was being emitted out into the environment. So they put in a new HEPA filter, decontaminated the biocontainment hood, and it reoccurred. It reoccurred, the same thing. And this was over 8 months' time. It kept reoccurring. We kept sterilizing it. So there was so that made us a little bit worried that it could have been a biological
You
agent
think they
that was
didn't want to replace the
decontaminating the hood.
they didn't want to replace the cabinet? Was that the reason?
Well, I finally called the manufacturer and negotiated a free hood because I said, and they came in, they were worried, like, what's going on? This is, they didn't want this to come out that their hood was becoming contaminated with something that we didn't know. Uh, so they gave us a brand new hood. I made that effort so I wouldn't get sick. We put the hood in a new room for 3 weeks, ran it continuously, no problems. As soon as we put it back into our room, within 2 weeks, the filter had turned black again. So there was something in that building or in that room that was contaminating the hood. And we still to this day do not know exactly what it was because Pfizer refused to test the hood and find out exactly what was causing this problem. So they eventually, well, that's a whole nother story you'll find in the book. They eventually do perform a test, but it was a test that was that, in my opinion, was purposely tested to receive negative results.
And you went to the person in charge at Pfizer for biotech safety, and what did they tell you?
Right, because we were having so many problems, and we had a major problem, as I told you before, of a building blowing up. Remember, this is a big campus. There's 6,000 people. This was a building in the campus, but it wasn't our building, but it blew up, and the Pfizer had to be closed down. So we weren't getting our issues addressed, and they were serious safety issues. I wrote the head of Grotton and asked her, what was the safety budget? Why can't we get, um, you know, a break room or safe offices because these are unnecessary exposures. We,
Sure.
it's one thing if you accidentally get exposed, you drop something, you get exposed, but to put your employees at risk when you can not do that. So I questioned her, we're like, how do you make the safety budget to fix these problems? And they called me down. The head of environmental health and safety at Pfizer called me down to talk to her. And she basically said that Pfizer's policy is that they only, regarding their budget and their policies, they only do what's legal and not necessarily what's safe. My mouth about dropped open when she told me that because you have to remember biotechnology is a technology that's constantly advancing. So there's no way that the laws in general, if you're going to make specific laws, uh, to keep up with biotechnology because it's constantly advancing. So They told me that from the head, the very top head of a uh, Pfizer labs of 6,000 employees, that Pfizer only performs what's legal and not necessarily what's safe.
And you had obvious concerns that it wasn't being addressed by Pfizer, and you decided that you were going to go to OSHA.
Yes, that's I had to go to OSHA during this time that we were raising safety issues and not getting them addressed. I had another exposure. That was the first the hood was the first exposure that was making a lot of people sick. Then one day everything changed because I was exposed to a genetically engineered virus in the lab uh, by someone leaving and an experiment overnight on my personal bench that should have been biocontained. Initially, they told me it was a safe exposure. It wasn't, but I soon found out they were wrong, and I developed a horrible, horrible illness. And while I was trying to find information and discover the truth about what they had exposed me to, it, I, I just was getting sicker and sicker, and they were denying me uh,
This isn't like
information
this
about
isn't.
what I needed to what I was being exposed to. So, and then they wouldn't. I went to OSHA because there's a lot before I go to OSHA. They're basically retaliating against me because I'm not being quiet. And the retaliation is extreme from placing me into a contaminated workspace to hostility. A man puts me up against the wall. Uh, and so eventually I find an attorney, thank God, finally to help me. But Pfizer won't cooperate, won't even meet us for 7 months. And so I had to go to OSHA. There was nothing else I could do because they terminated me. Well, they terminated me in the middle of the OSHA investigation.
And the idea that you've been contaminated with something, you're sick, other people in the laboratory have been getting sick in your laboratory, and you can't even find out what the material is. You
That's
try
right.
to request the material from them that you've
That's
been
right.
contaminated with, and they won't tell you. They said
That's
it's
right. And
optional.
that's called an exposure record. And by law, workers are supposed to get their exposure records. If you're exposed to a virus, you have to know the identity of that virus, especially a genetically engineered virus, because that's going to be a novel virus. No, if you go to the doctor, no doctor is going to have a test for a genetically engineered virus, right? So you have to get your exposure records. And one of the exposure records is the most important is the complete genetic sequence of the virus, because then you can have that analyzed, and there are molecular programs that can tell you basically what the virus has been cloned and created to do. So they wouldn't give that to me, and I had to fight. That's one of the reasons why I had to go to the OSHA. I also went to OSHA, of course, to tell them to please go into my department. Uh, I see, people are afraid to lose their jobs, and they're working in an unsafe environment. Go into my department and you're going to see we don't have a break room. I mean, that's so obvious. And they refused to go in and do an inspection. And they had documents of multiple complaints from multiple scientists.
So OSHA, which is supposed to be protecting our health and safety, the health and safety of workers in the United States, knew about the fact that there was a leak, there were contaminants at Pfizer in your laboratory, that people were actually getting sick. This is a systemic, serious problem in the laboratory, and they refused to go to that laboratory to find
Yes,
out what was going on. Is
yes,
that what you're saying?
yes. I tried to have them assist me to get my exposure records because, again, that is under law that employees have a right to their exposure records. And they ruled eventually that trade secret supersedes my right, which Pfizer had ruled. Pfizer said, I'm not giving you this information because trade secrets supersede your rights. Now,
So,
exposure records aren't just a piece of paper. They're they're records that are necessary for your health, for your medical care, and for your well-being. So here I have this company telling me, sorry, basically go to hell and die. Trade secrets supersede your right. And so this issue went all the way up to Washington, D.C., and OSHA ruled that trade secret supersedes my right.
And I mean, we're talking about a corporation making billions of dollars, and they're saying to the workers, we're not going to even tell you what you got sick from. We're not required to under the law.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it's amazing. I mean, their profits, protecting their profits and their copyrights are more important than the lives of the scientists at Pfizer. That's what you're basically.
Well, also the last thing that the biotech industry include, which Pfizer is one of many, companies doing this type of work. They do not want the public to understand that there's dangers in BL2 labs. Now, I worked in a BL2 lab. A BL2 lab is a step below a BL3 lab. A BL3 lab is uh, the the type of work that the COVID-19 virus was being worked on. That's a little bit more dangerous lab because those type of viruses that are used in the laboratory for research, if they escape, they can immediately cause a pandemic. So that's why they're BL3 and they're rated higher than BL2. Now BL2, we also still work with viruses that have certain types of gain of function on them. So it's still very dangerous, but they define BL2 laboratories, which is a biosafety level 2, is that if you do get exposed, it will cause moderate disease. So it's very ambiguous what a moderate disease is because I'm telling you, I did not have a moderate disease.
You got a genetically
Uh,
engineered disease that you were
yes,
trying to find out about. They prevented you from finding out about. Then you went to OSHA and you did, and what happened at OSHA? They wouldn't do a visit to the laboratory to find
it
out
would.
what's going on. And also, apparently, they took your documents, which you would give to them, and copied them and known to you. They gave
Yes,
them to Pfizer.
yes. Well, here's the bizarre thing. The investigator called me up and she said 3 times, please bring your attorney-client privilege, I mean, not, attorney documents with you. And I thought, why would the ocean, I immediately felt uncomfortable because attorney-client documents are privileged and they're private. You're talking to your attorney about, what's going on and you're trying to figure out what's whatever. But she said, "Oh, I only need them because of dates to make sure something that you had gone to." I don't know I can't remember. So I did bring them. I didn't give them to her. We discussed some dates that I found an attorney, and I, put the date that I said, "Oh, let me see. That was the first day I went to the whatever questions." At lunchtime, after the meeting, I had all my books in my hand. I was going to bring them down to my car, lock them up for lunch, then bring them back because these were private documents. I
Yeah.
wanted them in my safekeeping. And when I was leaving the room, the investigator said, "Oh, Becky, that's just too much for you to carry. Listen, I promised you I'm going to lock them up in this room. No one's going to touch them, blah, 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 blah. And so I thought, well, okay, she seemed trustworthy. So I kept them in the room, came back an hour later. And when I came back, she said, oh, she held up a manila envelope saying, here are the documents you gave me that I could copy. I had given her some documents, and I knew what was in the because we were discussing them when we were having an interview. So I had put them in a manila envelope, and I gave it to her. When I came back, it was thicker than the initial, manila. And then she quickly changed subject because I looked at it, I'm like, hey, that looks thicker than what I gave her. And she said, oh, this is what you gave me. And then she changed subjects and she said, oh, you've got a really good case. And then now she's changed. Well, what happened is that she copied my attorney-client privilege documents when I was gone and put them in 52 pages in my OSHA file. So she stole them. That OSHA file went to Pfizer. I mean, this is how it's unbelievable how you're trusting a government agency to do what's right, and it's just full of deceit and pro corporation, trying to hide, trying to be a partner with Pfizer to hide.
She was literally an agent for Pfizer.
Well, she wasn't an agent for workers, that's for sure.
And so later on, you actually wanted an investigation of what happened, how they stole your files, how they ended up with Pfizer. And you met with David Michaels, the head of OSHA. Why don't you talk about that visit you had with him?
Okay, no, I didn't win OSHA. OSHA dismissed my case and wouldn't go in for an inspection, wouldn't help me with my exposure records, getting the sequence of the virus so I can get medical care. And then she closed the case and said, wouldn't give me an excuse of she wouldn't really tell me why she was closing the case after a year. And then I found out after I was able to finally get my file because she still wouldn't give me the file. She said you could appeal the case, which I did, but I said, "How can I appeal the case when you're not telling me why you're throwing it out?" Well, you don't know that information. I can't give you that information. So I finally, after I appeal and then I lost on the appeal, and remember, I don't know how they're making decisions because they're not telling me anything. And I finally have to FOIA my my file to understand why they fired me. And she put that I was out to get money, that I had filed a OSHA complaint to get money when people were falling down ill in the lab, when there were biocontainment issues. See, they just wanted to silence me. They wanted to silence me to the ends of the earth,
They wanted to shut you down.
shut me down. So the
Well,
book's,
I was asking you about because here you
yeah,
have a situation where a worker who is contaminated and other people contaminated goes to an OSHA official, and that OSHA official takes the documents that you give, copies, illegally copies some of your documents, and then helps provide those documents to Pfizer, the company that you're fighting to get your records. And you are faced with a situation in which the agency, which is supposed to protect you and workers, is actually working with the employer, the company, against you. And you did go to David Michaels at that time under
yeah.
Obama, who
Uh,
was the head of OSHA in the United States, to ask him, "Can you do something about this?"
yes, yes. So I think I went to David Michaels, the head of OSHA, after I won the lawsuit. I think it was after I won the lawsuit, uh, or was close to that point, because I was very angry that they had really, denigrated my good name. I did not go to OSHA because I wanted money. There was a serious issue, and I was sick also. So I went to David Michaels to try to get the information about what was going on, because when I did receive my file, it was all my paperwork and 2 pages from Pfizer that were not, it wasn't, there was nothing in there that was credible enough that a uh, investigator could have easily investigated and said, no, this is not right. Hold on. So, and then there was no inspection. No, her inspection report wasn't there of how she came about to this decision that I was out to get money. So it was just a charade. It was a
And
charade.
what did David Michaels say? Did you ask him?
Well, I did, but then he never invested. I wrote him a letter. Hey, there's nothing here. Where's her file of investigation?
So,
What's
so
going
there's
on
actually
here?
there's actually what I would say criminal collusion with this investigator, with Pfizer. You go to David Michaels, who was appointed by Obama to be head of OSHA. You give him this information, and apparently there's nothing he can do or does do to get to the bottom of why an OSHA official who's responsible for protecting workers is colluding with Pfizer to basically screw the worker
Yeah, yeah,
and cover the whole thing up, and why there's no even investigation. The New York Times came out with a report, and David Michaels said, "We don't even have the staff at OSHA to investigate these biotech laboratories." Can you imagine that? I mean, the US government and OSHA doesn't have the staff to investigate these biotech laboratories all over the country that are using technology, new technology, to develop drugs which could threaten all of us. And one interesting point about this is there's this whole thing about Wuhan, the release of agents possibly at Wuhan, or
Mhm.
whatever happened. But here in the United States, they're not even protecting the workers at these laboratories who are working with these substances.
It's exactly right. And the free speech rights for workers to raise issues of safety, it's very limited your rights to do that. If my issues had not been a public health and safety concern, because, releasing genetically engineered viruses in the environment, that's a public health and safety concern. But if I wouldn't have had that concern, if it was just like they're leaving poisons around, a company can come and just squelch you, just so well, they still did that to me, but I kept fighting. After 10 years, I kept fighting. So,
They thought they would destroy you. I mean, the book you talk about your whole body freezing. You're in terror because of this disease you have. They won't give you the information about it. And then you tried to get lawyered. You tried to go to court. You couldn't get a lawyer. You go to court and you get a judge who says you shouldn't raise the issue of public health and safety, public health at your trial.
oh, yes, that she said I couldn't say the words public health and safety because it would prejudice the jury.
It would prejudice the jury.
But Pfizer sure got to say whatever they wanted to. See, the issue was uh, at that time uh, a big movement to work on human embryos in the laboratories work was occurring. And it's big money. It's big money. I mean, from California, it's like $3 billion a year they put into human embryonic stem cells, paid by the residents of California. So I don't want to get into the politics too much of what happened, but all the federal funding was stopped under Bush, and so the movement went to states. Each state was to be targeted that their residents pay for human embryonic stem cells, which the controversy was you have to destroy the embryo. To do the work, you have to destroy the embryo. Of course, it's controversial, but that's big money. So they were asking Connecticut to take $100 million of their taxpayer money to support this research. So here is this big movement with TV ads all over. Oh, human embryonic stem cells is going to cure the world, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, I'm reporting serious biosafety problems in the lab. So I believe that the judge the the judge's husband at that time was some sort of financial investor, and they were working on trying to oversee this $100 million.
So he had a
Something
financial
like some sort of he was working, and so Pfizer also was going into meetings.
he had a business relationship.
He had a business
He was
relationship.
in the drug business.
He was in, yeah, trying to find investors or the money he wanted.
It's
I
well,
think
I
the
mean,
company,
the drug business is a big business.
yeah, but the
He,
company also was trying to manage $100 million. I mean, because you can make money off that. Give me $100 million. I'm gonna invest it. I'm gonna make money off that, and then I'll give it back a little bit to for the research. So it's big money. So my case, when it was coming out at that time, every biotech industry wanted it silenced. They didn't want this to
and
come
of
out.
course, the state could have said, "We're going to give you money, but you have to protect the workers."
That's right. You have
You
to
have to
establish,
protect the workers. Workers have to have rights who work. Biotech workers
but
should
they
have
did.
rights
Yep.
in the industry to know
Yep.
what they're working with and the dangers, which apparently is zero. Both
Yeah.
Democrats and
Zero.
Republicans, zero.
Zero. Democrats, the one good thing, this can't be a polarized issue because both Democrats and Republicans don't like workers. I think they really don't, they're really pro industry.
Your experience was with Democrats and Republicans.
Both, both.
So I
So
mean,
that's
but no difference in the way workers were treated and the way workers were allowed to be intimidated and terrorized by Pfizer and these other companies. And you got calls from people who said they wanted to speak out. They were sick, they were terrorized, they were afraid. I mean, what a frightening thing. Workers in the United States who work in this industry are afraid to speak out.
that's true.
They're
That's
afraid
true.
to talk about what's happening for fear of retaliation.
And losing their job and losing their career. And I had, there was another gentleman from the safety committee that came up to me and said, Becky, I have two children or a child that I have to support. I have a wife and a child, and if we go to OSHA reporting this, I can't risk it. You know, and I can understand that. I can understand that because I lost my career, I lost my health. My name was dragged through the mud. It took 10 years to get justice. Who can survive with financially for 10 years without income? Uh, the whole thing was. I hope the public reads the book. It's very important to understand the 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 situation about free speech in the workplace regarding issues of public health and safety, especially.
And you weren't the only one that was intimidated. Your husband, whose job was he was in a medical corps to inspect laboratories, drug laboratories. He was supporting you and your efforts, and they tried to actually coerce him to get you to drop the lawsuit. That's a federal crime. That's a felony.
Yeah,
To coerce somebody
they
to,
wanted him to make me settle with Pfizer because the issue about workers is that somehow it's probably very easy because you're going to lose your job if you don't, go their way. They want workers gagged. So if you get injured on the job, the first thing you might come up with is to sign a document that you can't talk about this. You know,
NDA,
we'll help you, but
non-disclosure.
you can't talk about this. You can't talk to the reporter. You can't tell anything. So they're tr and if the public believes that there's no injuries in the biotech industry, read my book because your eyes are going to be opened. This isn't just not a case about me. This is a case about workers that are being silenced and they have no rights after they get injured.
And you were lucky actually to get to court. And the book talks about your battle just to get a lawyer, just to get
Yes.
into federal court. And then you meet in mediation, and the judge says you can't fight old New England money. You can't fight the system really. This it's a
Oh,
lost cause. That's
yeah. Well, I think this was during a pre-trial mediation because when you go to these pre-trial mediations and you're trying to settle, the first thing that the company wants to do is gag you, so you can't talk about it. Well, I had already talked to many injured workers that were afraid of Pfizer, what they would do, and they warned me, "You're going to sign. I can't tell you because I've signed a gag order. They made me sign a gag order." So I knew, especially because the importance of what I had discovered in the lab that could hurt all of us. And they were blatantly just disregarding these serious issues. It's one thing if you have an issue and they fix it, then not a big deal because, things can happen. But they were blatantly just saying, we do what's legal and not necessarily what's safe, and that's too bad. Um, so at these meetings, the first thing they want you to do is sign a gag order. And I just refused. I thought, they're not giving my exposure records. I'm very sick. I'm not signing any gag order. They have to either give me my exposure records or we're going to have a fight. And so I never did sign a gag order. And that's the reason why I could write the book. That's the reason why I can write the book.
and this is the only book in the United States and maybe in the world talking about what's really going on in the biotech industry.
That's right.
The reason is the power of that industry. You look at all the TV ads of the drug companies. They control the media.
That's
They
true.
spend billions of dollars on ads. If you take this, you'll get sick. If you do this, you'll get all the diseases you're going to get. If you take these drugs, I mean, all the monopoly control of these drug companies. Nobody wants to challenge them. I mean, CBS, I mean, your story is very powerful, very significant about protection of not only biotech workers, but the public, because one of the reasons that the jury may have voted for you and you won the case is because they found out that this was being released into the air.
That's right. Yes.
And the
Uh,
company did not want people to know
that's right. That's
that
right.
these materials were released in the community of Groton, uh, could have contaminated people in the community.
That's right. You had asked me about going into this mediation, and the person that was trying to mediate between Pfizer and myself and my attorneys, she came in and said, "Hey, listen, no matter how egregious your story is, the people in power are not going to allow change of the laws where workers can sue their employees for a really egregious issue." Most people don't know. I don't know if people know this or not, but if you're injured on the job, you have to go through workers' comp. You have to go through workers' comp. And the powers that be want workers to go to workers' comp only because it's corporate controlled. The heads of workers' comp are nominated by the powers that be. So they can control what's, you know,
And they keep it secret. They
and
keep it all secret.
in my case was very egregious. I mean, I should have been able to file a lawsuit against Pfizer for their willful and wanton misconduct against me and the public health and safety because there was one certain law in Connecticut that we could try to do, but the judge threw it out. She would not allow it. So
So
it's
you
just
weren't even allowed, even though it was willful
yes,
action by the
and
company to harm
that's
you.
a political decision by the powers that be to keep things quiet and keep things in control.
And this whole struggle, how were you able to fight Pfizer and win against Pfizer?
It was very, very difficult. I mean, I really hit some lows and it was a big struggle, especially because I was so sick. But I think it's because I was so sick and I was trying to get my proper medical care that was one issue that, kept pulling me forward to try to get an answer because my husband and I thought I was going to die at one time. I mean, it was a very severe illness.
And Pfizer should have been charged with actually criminally covering up what happened to you. I mean, it shows how twisted the laws are that this company conspired, in my view, criminally conspired to cover up what they did to you and the other lab workers.
Yep.
And they
Yep.
got away with it. And no liability. None of these executives, none of these CEOs goes to prison for refusing to protect workers and actually conniving and conspiring to cover up the contamination of these workers so that they're getting sick. And that's law. That's legal for these companies, these executives who both Democrats and Republicans take money from.
That's right. That's right. And in our post-COVID-19 pandemic, that pandemic was awful. I mean, I think everybody can agree there was, I mean, economically, people die, and then people dying, and then the social, political, fighting between people. Uh, and I do not want another one of these epidemics or pandemics to occur from a biotech lab. I mean, this is a very serious issue. Technologies are getting more advanced and more dangerous as we speak, and we need workers' rights. If you don't have free speech rights for scientists, for physicians also, you need, a lot of physicians are frightened to speak out. And for injured workers, the public's just going to be ignorant about what the safety in biotech labs. So my book, it's a story about me, but it's a bigger story, and I hope the reader gets that. I mean, the story is about me, but it shows uh, the culture of biosafety that really operates in the United States regarding biosafety and safety issues. So it's hopefully that's what I was trying when I wrote the book to get a bigger picture of what's going on. It's just not about me.
And you would think that this case and the issue, biotech safety, in light of COVID, in light of pandemics, that the corporate media, all the media would focus on this to prevent another possible exposure. Who knows?
Well,
And
the
yet,
corporate media wants corporations to self-regulate. That's the last thing. I don't get calls from uh to be interviewed by corporate media
well,
because
after CBS, not only corporate media, Democracy Now, for example, It's a national.
Right. NPR.
They never interviewed you. Democracy Now! I mean, here's an issue, timely issue. It's an issue of life and death. There are probably biotech workers who have died or seriously injured all over this country, and yet nobody knows about them.
Yep.
Nobody knows about them. And
It's
the
a secret.
media doesn't want to touch it. Uh-oh, you'll be fighting Pfizer. You'll be fighting another drug company. We don't
Well,
want
you're
to
going
go
to
after
lose
these
your
drug companies.
media money coming in from big corporations. My book also talks about I'm not only fighting against Pfizer, when I go out to the regulatory agencies like OSHA, we had just discussed, or physicians, they're frightened. They're frightened of Pfizer. And I'm like, well, I wonder what, it's just shocking to me that
You
I'm
went
fighting a
Columbia,
system. I'm
you went to
fighting a
Columbia and
system.
Yale,
Yeah.
Columbia and Yale to find out what was going on with you. And it
And
turns out they didn't really want to find out what was going on with you.
because they get big money. They get big money from Pfizer. And we just received this vaccine card, my husband did, in the mail, and this is how widespread Pfizer goes. So they're saying get your vaccines, shots can help diseases, whatever. And then it says this postcard was sent by your healthcare system, which is public health department here in New Mexico. Okay. Uh, Financial support for this communication has been provided by Pfizer. Pfizer's giving money to our public health department. Now, if that's not a conflict of interest, because our public health department should be monitoring vaccine injuries, how effective a vaccine might be. If Pfizer's giving $1 million to, I don't know how much money they're giving them, but my assumption is pretty big. Do you really think the public health department is going to say, oh, Pfizer, your vaccine is not working on this batch or whatever, if it does happen. I'm not saying it does happen, but it's a conflict of interest. So Pfizer, I discovered when I was battling this huge battle that they're so networked and infiltrated with monetary financial interest,
So
conflict.
that's a real threat to science because these drug companies have taken over medical schools, have taken over public health departments by giving money, the privatization of public
Yes,
health, that you
yes,
can't even know that the science is accurate because of the coercion. I mean, if
that's
Pfizer is paying for studies,
that's right.
I mean,
So
what kind of faith can you have in studies if it's paid for by the drug company who wants to sell
yeah.
more vaccines or drugs?
Yeah, and I discuss that in my book, why this has happened. Why have we had this change from an academic institute that used to really prioritize social and public interest in their research to now they've switched to a private interest. And I discussed that in the story about what has happened with how through laws about how now universities can make big money off technologies,
And
off technologies that the public has paid for. So now it's now biotech industry and in academics, it's big money and it's big business. So
it's a system you're fighting.
it's
And
a
you
system.
discover that
Yeah,
in your struggle. It's not just Pfizer, it's the whole system.
yeah. So
It's
I also went to the public health department at in Connecticut, and I gave them many academic notes about the virus I had been exposed to. I eventually found out a description of the virus I was exposed to, and it was supposed to be contained in a BL2 plus facility. And I gave them three legitimate that it should have been biocontained, not on an open bench. And again, the public health department in Connecticut had a conflict of interest because they were involved with this $100 million human embryonic stem cell uh, issue, and so the investigator kept saying, "Oh, this certain academic from Stanford University said it's a complete safe virus." I'm like, what? Uh, who in the what irresponsible scientist would say this is a safe virus? And I find out Pfizer's giving him $1 million to start a biotech company, private, from Stanford, private company. That's the academics now, unfortunately, it's big money and they don't care about public health.
And the University of California as well, anesthesiology department at UC San Francisco. The faculty there, the professors, they actually have drug companies, drug businesses that they're involved in. There was
Yeah,
a case in Davis, UC Davis, where they were testing cadavers with their drugs illegally. I mean, the incestuous relationship
that's
between
what
the
it is,
drug
Steve.
industry and science and our medical system is dangerous to the health of the people of the United States and the world.
I agree with you, and we're paying $50 billion a year. We're funding from our pockets, and then they don't prioritize, you know, public interest. So I had called up a few academics when I was sick trying to get help, and I said, "Aren't you, concerned about public health and safety?" And these are academics that public money is going into their pockets to do their research. Oh no, no, that they were real arrogant. Oh no, we don't have any obligation to public health and safety. Uh, we only have obligations to what's written in our grants. So that's how arrogant academics have become regarding their switch over from public concern or public uh, doing research for the public good versus doing research for making money. I just it's a hard story to swallow.
It's a hard story, but it's a true story. And it's a story that these companies and the government really don't want you to know about because that's who you were fighting. The
That's right.
industry, the media, and the government to get your story out. And when you won your case, small little thing in the New York Times, no follow up.
No follow-up.
CBS, the 60 Minutes could have done a whole story. But of course,
Yes.
CBS is taking money from Pfizer. So
Oh,
obviously,
they're all taking money. And the NPR too. I thought NPR, oh, they're going to take my story. No, because they were uh telling the story about how wonderful human embryonic stem cell research was, and they had weekly, oh, it's so just wonderful, wonderful. But when I would call the, hey, wait, hold on, we have an alternate, hush, hush,
corporatization of the media,
corporation.
I mean, having companies give money and decide, I mean, they'll decide what the media is going to say.
That's right. And my husband and I were just talking about what media do we go to find the truth? It's very difficult these days.
And the unions, of course, support the Democrats for the most part. And you went to the unions. I mean, the unions should be taking it up. I mean, all biotech workers should have the right to have unions, but of course, they keep the unions out of most of the
Right.
biotech industry.
To my knowledge, there's no biotech union, and there wasn't when I was working there, that's for sure. So, no, biotech workers aren't unionized. Now, you had mentioned something about there's a union now in
University of California has UPTE, Union of
Oh,
Professional Technical Employees, CWA. So they
okay,
are
that's
unionized, and they
that's an
actually
academic institute, though.
it's an
That's
academic institute, and they
unionized.
actually have cases around biolab safety or laboratory safety because workers have been killed because of the lack of safety protocol and protections in laboratories. But if you have a union, at least the union can take up that issue to
That's
defend
right.
the members. If you don't have a union, you're on your own.
You're on your own and you are fighting the biggest giant you can imagine. It was a tough go. It was a tough go. I'm just glad that I won my case and I can speak about this, and I hope people read the book and they can understand what the issues are, because we really need to provide workers with free speech rights and with greater health and safety protections. I can't believe that a worker at private industry is not guaranteed a safety committee that functions as a safety committee should. It's just unbelievable.
And the whole drug industry, they control the government.
It appears that way, doesn't it?
I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And in your case is a prime example because you went to government agencies and they basically, in the case of OSHA, conspired against you to help Pfizer. So
Yep.
that is really what comes out clearly in your book. And I think every worker, every person in this country is concerned about public safety, concerned about science, and having the true facts about what's going on in our society, that they have the right to do that. And your book explains exactly how it's not
Yes.
working for the people of this country, for scientists like
Yes.
yourself and others.
Thank you for really acknowledging that because I don't want people to think it's just about me, a story, someone, whistleblower. The book shows a bigger picture about what's going on, and it's very important.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. We've been talking with Becky McClain, a molecular biologist, a scientist at Pfizer who saw that there were some serious health and safety problems, reported, got sick, and then had a long battle war to defend herself, protect her life, Pfizer, and win successfully in a lawsuit against Pfizer, and actually come out with a book that wasn't covered by an NDA, preventing her from telling her story. So thanks for
Right.
joining us on Work Week.
Thank you, Steve. It's great seeing you.